Even though No Man's Sky's game style does not need real security, today's fun little project will at least be a great way of blocking everyone out of your base except for the ones with the passcode. After today's guide, you'll be able to create a pin code for your friend's only base or perhaps even a puzzle game. The door behind me can only be opened by pressing the right combination of numbers. In this case, we need a 4-digit code. The code I chose for this door is 8397. Entering the code in the right sequence will open the door on the right and we can walk through it. Above the door you might also notice some lights. These will turn on each time a correct number has been entered. Pressing the wrong number will also reset the installation, the lights will turn off and the door will close again. As you may have noticed, the switches are blended inside the wall, which hides both the connectors and the wires. If you would like to know how I did this, then check out this guide here. I have prepared a similar setup here so we can wire the installation together. The installation you see right here is what you will need to make a 4-digit pin code. I will explain further ahead how to make longer codes. First things first, we need to make sure we know which button is what number. If you go into your build menu and select the number decals, you can scale down the number to the smallest size. It is still quite large for the button, but you should be able to locate the number in such a way it is recognizable. Once you place the first number, do not go out of the build menu, but simply cycle to the next decal. That will keep the next number scaled down and we can now place it on the second button. Just like before, position the number so it's recognizable. And that we will be doing on each of the switches. As you might have noticed, I have skipped 0 as I only have 9 buttons. You could of course add more buttons and symbols to this to make even a more complex code. Now all the buttons have been marked, we can now begin with wiring the installation. We will be creating a simple code for this tutorial, but you can change the code if you feel like it. For this demonstration, I will be using 1, 2, 3, 4 as our pin code. On the top here you can see I have 1 inverter and 4 auto switches. These will be used to create the pin code. You also might have noticed that they are on a wall that is slightly offset inwards, so that if I build a wall in front of it, the switches are hidden. It is very important to hide these switches, as we do not want to show how they respond when we press any of the numbers down here. So the first thing we need to do is pull wires between each of these switches. If you would like to extend your pin code, let us say 6 digits, then you will have to add 2 more auto switches to this installation and wire them up the same. But in this case, we only need 4 of them as we will create a 4-digit one. So the power will flow through this inverter to this auto switch. When this gets activated, the power flows through that one to the next switch, which then waits again to be activated and so on. We also need to pull a wire from the end of each auto switch to its own control point, which then will keep the switch turned on when activated. This switch cannot turn off anymore until of course it's interrupted by this inverter. So let us do this on each of the auto switches. This will now work in sequence, which means this auto switch cannot be powered as long as this auto switch is not activated first. But of course we need to power it up first, and we do that by pulling a power line from here to our entry of this inverter. As you can see, the power is now flowing through this inverter. Now it's time to start setting up our pin code. We start by powering up each of these buttons because each of them will have to send a pulse to either one of these auto switches or the inverter here, depending on the pin code. So let's begin with pulling a power line to the bottom here on the floor. And now we will connect each entry of these buttons to each other. And we can do this in a series of 3 buttons like this. Now, we could pull a wire from here to here and here to here and then to the power, but doing that will be slightly confusing to see which wire is which. So, let us pull a wire to the bottom of the floor as well. And then afterwards connect each of these to the power here. That should now provide each button with power. Now the wiring will depend on the pin code of your choice. In this example, we will be using 1, 2, 3 and 4. If you decide to go for 7, 5, 9, 3, you will have to make sure that the sequence is number 7 is the first number 5 is the second number, and so on. In this case, 1 is the first number of the code. This means that this 1 will have to trigger this sequence first here. If we would pull it to the last auto switch, 1 would become the last number to be pressed in the sequence. So, let us pull a wire from the button output here and connect it to the control point of the first auto switch. Pressing 1, the power will now flow through, activate this switch, which also in turn will activate itself. The power will now flow through waiting for the next digit to be pressed. In this case, that will be number 2. So pull a wire from this output here and connect it to the control point of the second auto switch. Then number 3 goes here, and the last one, number 4, to the last auto switch here. So now when I press the buttons here in the right sequence, it will activate here these switches in sequence as well. If I would press 4 first, it will activate this switch here, but as there's no power to it yet, it will also not activate anything behind it. We do have some unused buttons remaining, which are 5, 6, 7, 8 and 9, which are the wrong choices, so all these have to activate the inverter here, which in return, if we press the wrong button, will turn off the sequence and you have to start again. So let us bridge all the outputs of the remaining button, so from 6 to 9, from 5 to 8, and then pull a wire from 9 to 8 and to 7. And finally all of that to the control point of the inverter here. And this is the basis of our combination lock. So if I press 1, it will power up the first auto switch, then the power will be held for the next auto switch, which is waiting for the next button, which is number 2. And that powers up the second auto switch here. If I would make a mistake and then press 5, which is not part of the pin code, it will reset the system and we have to try again. Pressing the right sequence will allow you to power up the last auto switch, and with that you can also activate your door to open up. Now, of course, currently, if I would connect the door to this sequence, it will close the door instead of opening it, which beats the purpose of a pin code. That is why we need to install an inverter on this door to change how the door works. We already have an inverter here. From the output of the inverter, we can pull a wire to our door. Now we need to provide this inverter with power. We do have some power here from this wire on the back of the wall, this wire right here. So pull that power line through the wall and then pull that wire to the input of this inverter here. Now the door is closed. This now means when I pull a wire from the last auto switch in this sequence to the inverter's control point, it will open the door once the correct pin code is entered. This is the basic installation you need for it to work. It is possible to add another feature to this, which will indicate if you're pressing the correct sequence or not. This is where these lights come into the picture. Once again, this is secondary. You do not need this for the combination lock to work. It is just a nice feature that can assist you in seeing how your input is affecting the lock. So let us remove the wire here, which was the one that activated our door. The purpose of this setup is that the lights down there will light up every time a right number is pressed. But we want to avoid that when we press the right number, the light is lit up straight away. Otherwise, we will be giving away the correct numbers and the sequence of them. That is what these auto switches are for, as they will be used to create a delay before the light is lit up. To create those delays, we will have to connect each set of switches in series. And the output of each set will be connected to its respective lightbox. Each logic switch has a delayed power-up time. It will take about 1 second before any input translates into output. So if you send a pulse through this control point, the switch will respond to it about 1 second later. This is why I have 2 of these switches per lightbox. So 2 seconds need to pass before the lights indicates you pressed the right number. So let's pull a bridge from the input of each switch to its own control point. That bridge will now activate the switch once it's powered, and 1 second later will send power to the next switch, which then will take another second before powering up the lightbox. This should avoid the lightbox lighting up when pressing the right number, but not in the right sequence. What we can do as well is use the 4th lightbox as the power to activate our inverter here and open the door. Or we pull a wire from here again, which will open the door a little before the last lightbox is turned on. In this case, we will be using the power of the lightbox to activate our inverter switch and open the door. Okay, let us now connect our combination lock with the secondary setup. For this, we need every output of our auto switches here. I'm going to pull up some wires against the wall here, that way it's easier to recognize which connector is 1, 2, 3 or 4. This is 1, 2, 3 and 4 as the last auto switch here. So the first lightbox here is number 1, so we need to pull a wire from the first auto switch to the first lightbox here. Then the second auto switch to this set here, number 3 to here, and then the final auto switch will be powering up the last auto switches here. Okay, with this now completely set up, when I press 1, with a little bit of delay, the first light will be turned on. Then the second number of the code will turn on the second lightbox. and if I press the wrong number, the installation will reset, and so will the lights. Pressing the correct pin code will turn on each light box and in turn open up the door. One disadvantage of this installation, however, is, let us say I press 1 here, and then I would press number 6, which is the wrong one, it will turn it off. But if I press 3, which is one of the correct numbers, nothing will happen. While the power will not activate the sequence, it will also not reset the installation. Smart people will understand that this means 3 is a correct number, just not in the right order. There are ways to avoid this, but that will complicate the installation too much for this tutorial. Once everything is wired up and you're happy with how it works, you can now close off this wall here so nobody can see anymore what is going on in the background. We could also just complete the second wall here in the back, make it a double-sided wall and hide everything in between. The buttons in this example of course look a little bit messy, but if you follow my other tutorial on how to hide them inside the wall, you will not have to worry about wires showing. While electricity and logic in No Man's Sky seem complicated at first, it is not hard to understand. If you want to learn more about other installations or perhaps the basics of them, then check out these guides here. Don't forget to hit that like, and I will see you next time. This was Beeblebum. Goodbye for now.